What is the Maricopa County election plan?
It is a forward process planning of the election, ahead of the election, to identify all of the resources that we would be allocating, all of the different items that would be, for lack of a better word, planned for.
And is that plan presented to the Board of Supervisors for approval?
It is.
And do you have personal recollection of that plan being put together?
I facilitated, assisted, crafted, and presented that plan.
And do you recall it being presented to the Board of Supervisors?
In conjunction with, or with my co-director, yes.
And was that presentation done in an open meeting, noticed to the people of Maricopa County?
It was.
And did the Board of Supervisors vote on it?
They did.
And did that plan contain the number of signature verification, temporary and permanent employees that would be used?
It identified our goal of number of signature verification employees to be hired under the temporary capacity.
Do you recall what the goal was that was published in that plan?
I don't know specifically, but it was in, I mean, obviously increase over the primary and in the 20s, 30s to grow that temp staff for that process.
And in fact, was the temp staff grown for the process for the general election 2022?
It was indeed.
And as you sit here today, do you know how many temporary and permanent employees were used in the 2022 general election signature verification?
We had 155 user, if you will, assigned to that process.
Okay, now I want to know what we're talking about here. When you say user, are you referring to level 1 signature review verified?
Correct. And for clarification, actually, it would be 153 human users. There were 2 system users also identified in there, but 153 individuals that would have been tasked with or could assist with level 1 review.
153 employees that did this.
Yes.
And then you mentioned 2 additional users. Can you explain for the court what those 2 additional users are?
Yes, so we have what we call a batch processing and a system processing user, if you will. They are categorized for identification. As an example, and I think it may have been presented by the other witness, that there are 44,799 records that had 0 seconds. That is because those 44,799 individuals were in-person counter voters that came in and showed ID. So we don't signature verify. We don't go against that grain. We don't say, oh, well, your signature has changed, so even though you proved your identity, which is the purpose of the process, those automatically get moved into and identified as good sig pass.
So the law allows for an individual voter to verify their signature in a manner other than signing the outside of the green envelope.
Actually, the law mandates that for in-person early voting, and it's a recent change, a couple of years, that they must show proof of identity similar to as if you were voting on election day. However, they still use the affidavit envelope because they are voting early.
So they use the affidavit envelope that has the box for the signature, but they've already proven their identity as lawful voters in the process, correct?
That's correct. And those then are 0-second approvals because they're not required. They have already proven identity.
So even though they've already proven their identity, their green affidavit envelope still goes down for level 1 review?
No, those are actually submitted as good signature through a system process. They identified at check-in that they are in person early.
And that when they're identified, how does the system at Maricopa County signature verification record the time it took to verify that person's identity?
It would be a batch process that would from that check-in through that in-person site book, e-poll book, if you will, then that will identify that they have also captured that they provided proof of identity. That then data file will go up as if and entered into as a good sig through the system.
Can I mention that there were 2 users that were not among the 153? You just described one. What's the other one?
The others is our internal, what we call our internal good signature process. And that's reserved for the most part, our military and overseas voters.
What is a military and overseas voter?
Under UOCAVA, Uniform Absentee Citizen Voting Act, it prescribes that those particular voters nationally, not just in Arizona, are allowed to and provided for special exceptions, meaning they can be sent their ballot by mail, by email, or by fax. They can be returned by email, by fax, or electronically through a secure upload. Hence, they are not a regular mail packet, if you will, returned to us. They could be an electronic version of their voted ballot and their signed affidavit.
So how would the electronic recording process that monitors the time record those UOCAVA ballot voter identifiers?
Because those particular packets are not sent, they're not received in a mail packet. Example, you fax that to us. Those don't go through that normal mail pickup path. They then are, quite frankly, done how it was done, probably in 14 other counties that don't have our system. They are, that affidavit faxed in is then, and I think it was alluded to by one of the other witnesses, what we call VMO8, but basically it's a manual way to receive your affidavit, your repository, to verify that staff member, that would then be checked up as verified, card in front of the horse using our technology. But again, 14 other counties, probably that's the only way they can is use that manual. Then we go in and scan in that piece ID to assign it as a good SIG once it's been validated and as consistent.
So when it's scanned in, that UOCAVA ballot, how much time does it take in the computer to verify the identity?
So it's manually scanned in by that staff and via barcode reader, so it's literally 0 seconds.
0 seconds. And just to be clear, a UOCAVA voter could be our women and men in uniform serving in the United States military service overseas.
That is correct, and that's the bulk of them.
Could be diplomatic personnel.
Correct.
Could be expatriates that are living somewhere outside the continental United States, Hawaii, Alaska.
Correct. 3,800 of those were returned.
3,800.
Correct. Or the 2022 general.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may, yes.
Mr. Valenzuela, I've just placed a document in front of you. Could you read the number on the green tag?
Exhibit number 37.
Could you look at the document? Do you recognize it?
I am very familiar with the document, yes.
And what is it?
It is our 2022 August and November elections plan, primary and general.
That's the election plan that you just testified was presented to the Board of Supervisors, correct?
That is correct.
And do you have personal knowledge of Maricopa County Recorder and his team using this 2022 election plan in order to do signature verification, to guide them in signature verification, and during the 22 general election?
It sets out the plan of what our resources, how we would allocate them for all functions, but to include early voting and, in that case, signature verification.
And you recall that actually occurring in 2022?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I move Exhibit 37 for admission as evidence.
Objection, Your Honor. 37 is admitted.
Mr. Valenzuela, you've been in the courtroom for the past 2 days, correct?
Correct.
And you've followed along in the proceedings?
I have.
Do you remember Contester Lake's team putting a brief video up on the screen?
I do.
And what I'm referring to is a video from a camera in Maricopa County, McTech, which showed two workers in cubicles in front of computers. You recall that?
I do.
I believe that was Exhibit 19. And you were able to watch that video?
I was.
And when you were under direct examination by Contester Lake's legal team over here, they asked you some questions about that video. You remember that?
I do.
You remember being asked questions about the individual sitting on the left?
Yes, I do.
Were you able to see what that individual was doing?
I could see, and infer based on process and procedure what I believe he was doing.
Okay. So you saw it on the video,
I did.
and then you used your personal knowledge and experience from being a part of the 22 signature verification process during the general election to infer certain things,
That's correct.
but you don't know with 100% metaphysical certitude exactly what that individual was doing as depicted in that short video, correct?
I do not, but to add clarity, it could also be that it was a batch of verified and approved that would take.
On the basis of speculation, Your Honor. Just told him you're going to speculate.
Okay. I think that's the point of the question. That's what he's asking him, is he wasn't able to tell.
Okay, he testified.
Well, no, he asked him the question, basically. You couldn't tell for sure what was happening.
And he said, yes, Your Honor, he can infer.
Right.
So
No.
I'm objecting that asking this witness to speculate. Do you have any firsthand knowledge? Was he there watching it? He can see it on video.
No, well, you already,
He knows the process, Your Honor, then he full well understands the way it works and wouldn't be required to speculate.
no, I understand what you're saying, but just as the questions were asked of him yesterday, he can be asked the same types of questions today. This is based on what he observed and his understanding of what's going on. The other witnesses that have testified about that same exhibit have done likewise.
Understood, Your Honor.
My recollection, so I'll allow it. Re-ask her whatever, new question, same question, whatever you have for next for the witness.
You're right. I think the witness answered the question, so if that's sufficient for the court, then I'll move to the next question.
It's not me. I remember the answer that he said he applied what he knows
Right.
and viewed what was on the exhibit. And so his understanding was, based on his experience, he has an opinion, but he can't tell with 100% certitude what was happening.
Since the
So if you need more than that, you ask other questions. That's my recollection of what it was said. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you drew upon your personal knowledge from your own participation in the 2022 general election signature verification process in an attempt to infer what the individual on the left was doing, correct?
That is correct.
And what do you think he was doing?
I believe he was following the process that's trained to or prescribed, which would be before submitting your completed 250 batch to re-review them, using the term go backwards, and look at those. And there is no prescribed for or mandated that you, in the re-review, that you re-review all the signatures again, as an example. You're just seeing the dispositions you set and reaffirming that, as an example, I set this as an exception. Is that correct? Or there really is, or I set this as a good sig and there's really no signature there. So they're required to go back, rinse and repeat, if you will, and re-review.
Okay, so a level 1 signature reviewer is given a batch of 250, correct?
Correct.
They review those one at a time, correct?
Correct.
You take however much time they need to take to do it.
Yes.
You previously testified that some of them are really fast, correct?
to review them. There is potential for them to be reviewed quickly.
Others take more time.
Yeah.
There?
Yes.
And then once a level 1 reviewer done this, is completed the 250, the protocol is for them to go back and review and make sure those codes they assigned are correct.
Correct.
And in your personal experience, is that a pretty quick process?
It is, because once again, you're not, and they're not requested to re-review, go through all 3 exemplars as an example for something that's been exceptioned or set to be submitted as such, is to re-review just as a cursor check before committing that batch.
So you don't know what that individual on the left was doing and depicted in that short video, correct?
As testified, I do not, but I just can infer based on the process.
And your best inference is what you just told the court, correct?
That is correct.
Now, you also testified that that individual, to the best of your knowledge, was reassigned to do additional tasks. Recall so testifying?
Yeah.
And I believe you testified that at the time you didn't know why he was reassigned or where he was reassigned. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Subsequent to that testimony, have you taken any efforts to learn more about why that individual was reassigned?
I have.
Object, Your Honor. They're now introducing new testimony. They could have provided us with some form of employment history or reviews that would show why this gentleman was reassigned, when he was reassigned, and what user he was, Your Honor. I believe this to be user 134. If they would confirm that, we could have a more detailed discussion about this entire issue, Your Honor.
Understood. Problem that I have in this particular case is it's an election challenge. The information initially presented came through a public records request and not through any types of formal discovery. The entire batch of information that was submitted with regard to the keystrokes, the documentation, the exhibits, that showed up virtually on the doorstep of trial. And I've allowed it because I believe that it's important to have as much transparency and openness as possible. So late disclosure is kind of something that goes both ways with regard to this. I haven't heard anything more than the question that's been asked.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I might make a quick offer of proof.
Please. Yeah.
Your Honor, user number 134, we can show, began work at Maricopa County Elections Department on October 17th.
Mhm.
We can show that user number 134, the gentleman in question, continued working at Maricopa County Elections Department until November 11 as 11-1 reviewer, when such review was stopped, according to our witness's testimony, and most of the level 1 reviewers were let go. We can show this gentleman continuing to work in Maricopa County Elections Department in a different capacity, not related to some, I just want to testify and say something, but because they had a different role to fill. They were done with level 1, Your Honor, and we would like to be able to confirm that.
Your Honor?
Well, wait. Let me ask, just to clarify on your offer of proof. Your offer of proof, you stated that the individual in question was employed up through November 11th, but you said in the capacity of signature verification, as opposed to being reassigned.
That is correct, Your Honor. And I would ask leave to present at least some photographic evidence of this gentleman showing these various dates.
Well, I anticipate then that we'll have cross-examination on that very topic.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That's fine. So you can present what you want to, Mr. Liddy, and then we'll have cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was looking forward to cross, and
Okay.
as opposed to an offer of proof, which the way we usually proceed, but we'll go ahead. May I indulge the court reporter to reread the question?
You may.
So you have. And would you share the court what you learned about why that individual was assigned additional duties or different tasks?
As indicated, part of this, and last night I went to get clarity because I do not follow all 153 employees that are doing what their assignments that, as example in testimony, Mr. Myers and Mrs. Onegett got reassigned as needed. We have an as need to go to curing, to go to adjudication. So I wanted to get clarity because mostly I feel our temp workers, including our witnesses, did a due diligence. They did their job, and I felt this individual was being maligned, and I wanted to make sure what it was. As I testified, I don't know. I inferred, but I did get information specific to where he was reassigned and what he was tasked.
Thank you, Ray, and I appreciate that, and now we all know why you did it. But what I'm asking you is, what did you learn as to why this individual, the one on Exhibit 19 on the left, was assigned additional tasks when it appears that he was doing what you thought he was doing? Why is that? What did you learn?
So for clarity and finding out through our different management level that he was reassigned just like Mr. Myers. I'll use him as a perfect example, that he was predominantly assigned, Mr. Myers as an example, to curing, but could and did a few signature verification. This particular individual was assigned to different tasks, SEBs, to curing, to all that, but he did not prevent him from assisting in an all-hands-on-deck capacity because he was not necessarily moved out of that position for some sort of error or some sort of inconsistent work product. It was just more to the extent that we shift people as we do, and he was predominantly moved into different tasks rather than signature verification.
So it's your testimony that while he was being supervised during the 2022 general election signature verification process, no supervisor found fault in what he was doing at level 1 signature verification?
From my information I gathered, none that they had recollection of that specifically, that it was just reassignment and into different tasks as needed.
So he was reassigned because he was needed elsewhere.
As is part of our planning and part of our structure, we shift daily depending on the volume load in a given task.
So if there's a surge of curing that needs to be done, we call all hands on deck?
That is correct. Whatever the task may be based on the deadlines that are set that we need to meet.
So the fact that this individual was given additional tasks in no way should be interpreted that he had done anything incorrectly during level 1 signature verification review during the general election in 2022?
That is correct. To include the backwards review that is inferred he is performing, that he is being, I guess, apparently maligned to saying that is signature verification when in fact it more than likely is just a second review process.
So your testimony is that he was doing, after that, after the assignment of additional work, he was doing primarily curing.
Primarily curing, SEB. I do know that he also assisted with SEB process, which is a special election boards that go out and assist voters in nursing homes and such. So he was placed as helping wherever and whenever needed.
But he was perfectly qualified to continue doing level 1 review.
Correct.
And in fact, could have done additional level 1 review if he wasn't needed in SEB or curing, correct?
Correct. And as I testified, it wasn't exactly, but I know he was reassigned, and that reassignment terminology, never did I indicate that he was terminated. He was reassigned to different tasks, just as many others, including, again, Mr. Myers, Mrs. Onegett, whatever that task was that was heated at that moment that needed to be.
And in fact, that's consistent with your earlier testimony when you said he was reassigned, but you did not know why.
Correct.
But now you do know why.
Correct.
Because you inquired.
Correct.
Because you didn't want a worker to be maligned.
I don't want any of our workers. I really, truly believe all of them followed their oath as testified by the two witnesses. They did their due diligence. They did their work to the best of their ability as prescribed for in the oath. and I did not want him to be continued to be maligned when I didn't know the facts and by just saying I don't know.
Mr. Valenzuela, do you have any reason to believe that level 1, level 2, and level 3 processes were not followed in the 2022 general election signature verification and curing process?
Conversely, I have proof that it has to be because we could not get the product to tabulation. It's a systematic process that has to occur for that to move it to that level.
Do you have any reason to believe that any ballot affidavit envelopes were not reviewed at a minimum by a level 1 reviewer in Maricopa County Recorder's Office during the 2022 general election?
Outside of the 2 batch process users, if you will, that did not require then review other than a poll worker, no, every single one would have been undergone a level 1 and or level 2 it pushed through to as exception.
And those 2 exceptions are UOCAVA and in-person voting?
That wouldn't undergo our signature verification application and would be a manual process, the 3,800. And then, of course, again, the 44,799 in-person early.
And that's all in accordance with the 2022 general election plan
Correct.
and in accordance with Arizona law.
Correct.
Mr. Valenzuela, when's the statutory deadline for the curing process in the 2022 general election?
There, as indicated, there's 2 deadlines. For no signature, it was November 8th, 7 p.m. For question signatures, it was Wednesday, November 16th, which would traditionally be November 15th, Tuesday, but because of the holiday was added an extended day by 5 p.m. So November 16th, 5 p.m. for question signature.
So is that when the curing process ended in 2022?
That is correct.
Mr. Valenzuela, while you've been in the courtroom hearing the presentation of the Contester Lake's case in chief, did you hear about an alleged 70,000 ballot packets that were not signature verified?
I did.
Do you have any reason to believe that there were 70,000 ballot packets that were not signature verified in 2022?
With the testimony I've given, I believe that that is accounted for by the numbers I've already given, the 44,799 that were not signature verified because they were proof of identity early voting packet.
Let's walk through that again. 44,000 and what?
799.
That were not signature verified because why?
Because they were already, identity was proven as required by law through proof of ID because they voted in person.
In accordance with your testimony just a few minutes ago.
Correct. And then there is, in addition to that, when we're speaking and I hear that under 2 second 70,000 number, I do also infer, because I didn't do the extrapolation myself, but that they also has to account for the 15,411 signatures that were cured, that were verified and approved. And as presented yesterday in our guides, when that stamp is verified and approved is presented to in front of the level 1 user, they are to accept that as good and move on, meaning they have the due diligence of them setting it as an exception in the first place was taken, concurred, voter was contacted, voter cured, authenticated, we stamp it. That is as good as a good SIG as you can get. Then they were in that review process, 15,411 on top of that 44,799 would be less than a second and should be either because there is no review, broad characteristics, re-review, if you will, that is accepted and moved into that queue. So those could be in that under 2 second.
Well, Mr. Valenzuela, if you're correct, there is somebody out there alleging to the world that there were 70,000 with no signature review or signature review in a second or less or whatever. And you just accounted for all but about 20,000 of them, right?
In addition, you must add the 3,800 military and overseas that are scanned in on a outside of their signature reviewed and then scanned in as good sig. That would scan would take milliseconds, 0 second.
And you've already testified about that.
I just today, yes.
So now we're down to 16,000, couple hundred.
Well, I think the math may be more if you do the 44,000 plus the 15,000, that's 63. Then, so that if we're talking about 70, I think we're in the 4,000 range. 44,700 and the 15,411. So that's 63 plus the 366.
Sorry to interrupt. Anything else you think you can account for ballots that were properly handled in the general election 2022 that somebody may accuse you or Recorder Richer or your outstanding team of full-time workers and temporary workers, some of whom were in the same chair you're in right now, accounted for? Any others?
At the moment, no, but I can say with absolute certainty, if I could get those 70,000, I can give you specifically, because they're tied to a voter, exactly what their status was. They were a counter ballot, that they were a military and overseas ballot. So even the remaining that we're saying, well, what justify those, then that could very well be a Reynaldo Valenzuela with a big flourish R that had a Reynaldo Valenzuela exemplar, and it took the individual level 1 voter to say that is a consistent signature without doubt. Even looking at the first exemplar and counting 1,001, 1,002, good. So there is that potential that there are those exact match, but the majority, the bulk, are those in-person voters, 44,799, the cured that have a stamp, 15,411, and the military and overseas.
You just mentioned a counter ballot. Would you explain to the court what a counter ballot is?
We actually treat those particular affidavits, although they, again, use an affidavit envelope, it is the individual came in person to the counter, if you will.
So a counter ballot is the ballot from a voter who came into the counter in order to vote.
In this case, it's a holdover from when we had early voting, absentee voting since 1990, no excuse, where they would come into our office and counter. Now you can go vote at a vote center, so that we just left it as a counter ballot, but it's in person early.
In person early. And they have to give their ID right there on the spot, right?
As required by statute, yes.
So how many seconds does it take for a level 1 reviewer to do that?
Well, they're not doing it at all because, again, they've already, the idea of looking at signatures is to prove identity. They have proven identity as required by law. Those individuals are not second guessed to say, but the signature didn't match. We're not allowed to, and an EPM actually prescribes that you are not allowed to override that proof of identity. So those are established as good signatures.
Well, I'm not great at math, Ray, but when you said not at all, is that another way that maybe mathematically might be described as 0?
Correct. They would be 0 second because they are a batch process. And I think one of the witnesses, the analyst, was indicating that he identified that had to be, and it's a correct statement that it has to be, because and I'll absolutely concur that it's impossible for a human to do 0 second, but it is not possible to upload and import those proven proof of identity records in 0 seconds.
We've also heard in this courtroom today that signature verification is the, quote, first line of defense to ensure that a ballot that comes in and is tabulated is, in fact, a legal voter. Does the Maricopa County Recorder's Office or Maricopa County writ large take any steps prior to signature verification in order to ensure that the ballots cast in the 22 general election are by legal voters?
So, as indicating that it is the first line defense, that is an incorrect statement. The fact of the matter is, in order to get an early ballot, you must be a registered voter. So we work our way back into the process of how do you become a registered voter, and without over elaborating, you basically have to be vetted, your information sent up to Vital Statistics, MVD, Social Security, all to say you are who you are. So unlike voting in person on election day, that's what provisionals are. You could have not registered. You cannot have a not registered in early voting. You must have met that criteria. In addition to that, we also vet your address. During registration, I send you a voter ID card. It may appear to be altruistic of the department to let you know you're made the books, but in fact, it also serves another purpose, is to test your address. So you are a person, but do you reside at that address? Utilizing the United States Postal Service and their endorsement, return service requested, we contract to say if that individual, through their database, National Change of Address database, if that individual is not at that address, then that individual does not make it to the books.
So you can't just go to Walmart and buy a green affidavit envelope and a ballot, right? You got to get one sent to you by Maricopa County?
It has to be issued by us to a registered voter with a unique piece ID barcode that is assigned to that voter so that we can track it, and to that election more specifically. So it is a case that there is due diligence done on the front end before we send that. So it's not the first line. The first line is, before I mail you that packet, are you registered voter? Are you eligible? And is that your address?
So there's 3 lines you just mentioned right there before signature verification.
Correct. So if you use it in let's say a forensic document examiner analysis, I've done some due diligence, I've laid the foundation, and this is part of that is considered when you're looking at signature verification, that we've gone as far as even tracking it.
Testimony is based on some knowledge about a forensic document and analyst, and he's not a forensic document analyst.
Oh, okay.
And it involves the ballot envelopes being mailed to the voters and mailed back.
Okay. With regard to the statements related to forensic documentation or his knowledge of that, I don't believe he's qualified to talk about forensic documentation as an expert witness. But if you want to rephrase the question as far as...
Your Honor, I am asked him to testify to his personal knowledge.
Understood, but he threw in the phrase of it's one of the considerations for forensic documentation. That's what the objection goes to, and it can be phrased differently, but using that phrase as a technical term of art is the objection.
May I clarify?
Well, Your Honor, I would say that he's not using it as a technical phrase. He's using it in the normal vernacular for someone of his 32 years experience who has been trained in part by forensic.
Understood. My job is just to make sure that the record's protected in terms of, it may seem like a technicality to you, but it's been pointed out, he's using a term that's been used in this courtroom as a term of art.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would sustain the objection if you want to rephrase the question. Or you ask the same question if he wants to rephrase the answer without any reference to forensics, that's fine. I mean, statement that would indicate that he's qualified to render an opinion as to forensic documentation. His experience as far as factors on signature confirmation is a different matter. I'm focused on the term of art.
I understand, Your Honor, but I want to make sure I understand your ruling. You've said that the term forensic has been used in this proceeding, and there's not been a single person on that stand who's been qualified as a forensic expert. So others can use it.
No,
others can use it in the
want-
vernacular.
Liddy, I don't want to have debate.
Okay.
Okay, he used a term of art that's referred to. It's not just a term of art; it's a scientific label
I
for
understand.
a position, and went to great lengths talking about qualifications for other witnesses. He may have just misspoke in terms of throwing that part in, but he's not qualified to state an opinion as a forensic document examiner. He can give opinions related to his education, training, experience.
Sustained. I understand, Your Honor.
Thank you.
May I indulge the recorder to read back the question?
Yes.
Whatever the last question was I asked. So there's 3 lines right there you mentioned before signature verification that helps protect the public from illegal votes, correct?
So indeed, there is a foundation set that identifies these particular voters as registered voters. And my apologies, Your Honor, that what I was inferring was that what I heard in testimony yesterday from the forensic document analyst was that we lay foundation to saying, when I look at these signatures, what do I have? And so that is part of our foundational effort before we look at that signature to say there is precedent set that this is a voter that was mailed to, registered, verified, and even more that we did the return service requested and we tracked, which a lot of voters and a lot of the public may not know, all packets sent to a voter are tracked to your mailbox. So we tracked it. So that adds that credence, that foundation that when that packet comes back, we at least have that evidence that it is reached a vetted, verified voter to their vetted, verified address.
You know, you just referred to earlier testimony by a forensic expert. Are you referring to the gentleman in the back who got his training between 1989 and 1993 from his dad?
I'm referring to his analysis of the fact that there is foundation that they use when he does his particular reviews, if you will, that he has this certain things that he lays as foundation upon that or ahead of that review or during that review.
Okay. Ray, you testified that you did some level 1 signature reviewing in 2022 after the general election. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How many ballot packets did you review?
I don't know the exact number. I just know that a quick glance when we were looking at the data or providing the data, it was approximately 1,600. And again, I apologize to my staff that did 66 and more thousand.
Do you have any more? Do you have any idea of how many good SIGs you verified?
I know that approximately 1,300 because I had 311 later reference that I exceptioned.
So exceptions, which mean not good SIG and move on to level 2.
Correct.
300 out of 1,600-ish sounds pretty high to me. Does it seem high to you?
No, it bases on that day's batch and the clarity of the signatures within that 250 batch, if you will.
You also testified that you did level 2 signature verification after the general election in 2022. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Tell us about that. How many did you do and how many shifts? What'd you do?
The level 2, I don't know exactly how many because I didn't part as preparation look to have to provide that, but I can infer that I did towards the end, the all hands on deck I was one of those hands, and that I could probably say that with comfort, at least 1,000.
And you remember doing that in November 2022?
Absolutely, because of the nature of us wanting to get those cured as soon as possible, or get those dispositioned because of the short time frame we have for those voters to not be disenfranchised that fall into the question signature category.
And Ray, you also are qualified and have been trained to do level 3 in the signature verification process. Did you do that after the general election in 2022?
I did.
Tell the court about that.
So the level 3 is basically, again, a 2% random audit, and for the benefit and edification of the court, the 2% is derived from what the state has a vote verification committee established made up of 7 members, statisticians, 2 different statisticians, and those individuals determine the hand count, variance or percentage, and say what is a good sampling that will identify deficiencies. There is nothing in law that actually requires that level 3 audit, but as a best practice, we determine and decide that we should do that review and what percentage using that group that had identified statisticians that said this is a good percentage, we use that percentage. And hence I participate as other managers in a level 3 audit review of 2% of all signatures, not just good, It's good, bad, and otherwise.
And you have a specific recollection of doing that during the signature verification process in Maricopa County after the general election in 22.
That is correct.
So you mentioned 3 lines of defense before level 1 signature verification. Then there's level 1 signature verification, which you've done personally in 2022, and level 2 and level 3.
That is correct.
Is there a level 4? Is there additional activity on the part of the recorder's signature verification team to ensure this process is done properly?
There is a level 4.
Please
The
describe
level
for the
4 is,
court.
and I'm identifying as level 4. It's not, it's just to the sequential numbering.
I don't want to talk over each other. I want to ask you to please describe for the court level 4.
So level 4 is a daily audit review, not just a 2% random, but is a daily audit review done by managers specific of the user in themselves. So I can go look at Valenzuela R. I can see that Valenzuela R only did 1,600. Why is he slacking? But truth be told, I can see the dispositions he set for that particular day. And that is just a best practice that was put in place, actually a continued improvement for 2022 but it's not logged. It's just a matter of seeing those report or that system generated review that I can see that user 0001, how many they did today and what were all the dispositions that they set.
Mr. Valenzuela, I want to personally thank you for your diligent work during the 2022 general election. I have no further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Very well. Okay, cross-examine.
Good morning, Ray. May I
Good
still
morning.
call you Ray?
Yes.
All right, very quickly. I'll try not to take too much of this honorable court's time today. Heard a lot of talk today about process. Correct? A lot of your testimony has been aimed at process.
Been aimed at our training and guides.
Your training guides and your process, is that correct?
More specifically, the guides that are used and given to our level 1, level 2, and our training.
All right. You must show more than just going through the motions, though, shouldn't you?
I apologize. I'm not understanding the question. Showing, to rephrase or re-ask.
Does the law just allow you to go through the motions?
I don't want to infer what you mean by going through the motions.
Okay. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about whom I refer to as user 134, and that's for very specific reasons. And that would be because after this video was identified, a particular individual from the news media.
Okay, just a question. That's not.
Do you have any personal knowledge or any knowledge whatsoever of this data being given to Mr. Archer of ABC News, the data guru?
Objection, Your Honor, form. Foundation.
Well, relevance.
I don't know what he's talking about. Relevance.
I don't want this to go off into,
Understood, Your Honor.
I understand it's cross, and I understand we're not the feds, and you're allowed to inquire into matters that are relevant to the proceeding, but I don't think it's relevant.
It's relevant, Your Honor, because
Well,
the witness here now,
wait. What I'd like to do is have a bench conference on this rather than just have everybody make speeches. So why don't all the lawyers that are involved come up?
Oops, sorry.
All right, are we back hooked up electronically? For everybody? Luz, can you hear? Very well. I think we're back ready for you to proceed.
We are. Ray, you testified about some of the data in that chart that was admitted as Exhibit 18. You recall that testimony?
Objection, Your Honor. Exhibit was not admitted. Exhibit 18.
Okay, let me look. I don't have it as exhibit admitted, so you're going to have to ask it differently.
I apologize, Your Honor.
But general rule, let's wait till the question's out of his mouth, and then Mr. Valenzuela, as you can tell, but if you see somebody stand up, it's a good clue that somebody's got a problem with what's going on. So don't answer the question until I have a chance to rule on an objection. Fair enough?
Understood.
And my confusion, Your Honor, it's Exhibit 47 because Exhibit was missing the every other page. You gave testimony about the 70,000 number and contained within Exhibit 47. Do you recall that?
Not specific to that exhibit, to the number that was quoted that there were 70,000
Where did you get that information?
in court mentioned yesterday by Mr. Olson.
No, the information contained within your testimony regarding that 70,000 figure, and I presume you were testifying about what shouldn't be included in that 70,000 figure. Is that correct?
Correct. I believe you're asking, or I'm sorry, re-ask the question. Where did I get?
Where did you get the data you relied on in your testimony regarding the 70,000 that was presented with Exhibit 47?
Part of it is through known process and understanding what those could be, and from the database itself that we generated for public records requests.
Okay, so you actually looked at that data last night?
No, I did that preemptively before court, even day one.
Okay, when you testified that you hadn't looked at that data, that you are not a data analyst. Is that correct?
No, I testified that I had not looked at your data that you were inferring on CD but I am familiar with, and I actually, as I indicated, submitted the ticket for.
Okay. Did you look at different data than is contained on that CD?
Once again, I don't know what's on the CD. I can infer, but I looked at the data as we provided it, and in the folder that we would have provided it as far as for that particular public records request.
You testified you're not a data analyst, correct?
No, I'm not.
Okay, what did you do to generate these numbers?
I opened them in a pivot table. I looked at the data is raw data, and it doesn't require that I'm analyzing, I am just basically, as even the analyst had indicated, filtering to that particular batch process user to see what total those.
Why don't you walk me through how you did that?
It's a matter of taking the particular data, breaking it into manageable bytes, and then filtering and wizard to that particular user.
If I were to give you a computer right now, would you be able to show me how you did that?
I could.
Okay.
Yes.
Who assisted you in looking at this data, Mr. Valenzuela?
No one assisted me in looking in that data.
You did it by yourself before trial?
Yes, sir. And that is what part of my job is, not just that specific thing, is to do data analysis, although I'm not certified or trained in it, but the 30 years up is to inspect data and to extrapolate statistical findings from that particular data.
What's a standard deviation?
The standard deviation would be a plus or minus, as far as if you kind of removing that from a.
Okay, Mr. Valenzuela, you don't.
As I indicated, I'm just doing number extrapolation and filtering down to a specific user. I can get that total.
You may.
testimony yesterday about averages. Do you recall that?
I don't recall giving about averages. I don't know that.
A lot of your testimony yesterday on direct was about talk of baseball players and bringing averages down. Do you recall that?
Yes, okay.
Can you point the averages out on that chart?
Again, I apologize. I'm not familiar with this chart. So the averages, as far as percentages.
I'm asking you to point the averages out on that chart.
Objection, Your Honor.
Which columns contain averages?
Hold on a second. What's your,
Objection, Your Honor. Form and foundation. The witness just testified he's not familiar with the exhibit.
okay. Well, he can be asked to read the exhibit.
I'm giving him time to review, Your Honor. I'm sitting here quietly, which is abnormal for me.
I'm taking it one question at a time, Mr. Blunt. You asked him to read the exhibit to determine whether there were averages displayed on the exhibit. Am I correct, sir?
Well, I've asked him to look at the exhibit and to tell me which columns contain averages.
If he's able to do so. So I will overrule the objection to the extent that if you're able to answer the question, you can do so without speculating or guessing.
The percentages is where I infer, and unfortunately, I think that is still speculation, that the percentages based on verification rate overall and the verification rate by seconds.
Okay, so those are averages?
I assume so. I don't have the data, the raw data, how it was extrapolated in front of me, but I presume so, yes.
Okay. Do you know the difference, Ray, between an average and a percentage?
I do not. And again, I testified I'm not a data analyst and I don't understand this sheet, as I actually inferred already and claimed.
Okay, you don't understand the difference between an average and a percentage, yet you were able to import a CSV file with over 1 million rows, extract data, and analyze that data before you came to court here today.
That is incorrect.
Okay, who helped you?
I did it myself, but I did not extract data. I did not import. I used the raw data to filter to a pivot table, if you will, that indicates for this particular user what is the total number of records were done by that user.
I believe the words that just came out of your mouth were we.
Oh, I apologize. No, I.
You.
Yes.
Okay. What is raw data?
Raw data would be the raw data set that is being provided for a particular ask.
Okay. What do you call that kind of data?
Me personally, for my use, raw data.
What kind of file is it saved in?
It can be saved in multiple files. You can save it as a text file. A CSV is just another formatted, comma-separated value document. It can be a text file. It can be in a smaller capacity if it's under 1 million plus records. It could be an Excel file.
Okay.
See it? So multiple formats.
And so you don't recall testifying when you were on direct examination that you had not looked at the data you had produced to us?
I don't recall that. I apologize if I did. What I indicated is that I did not look at this data that was used to extrapolate this particular exhibit.
All right.
Just consistent with.
And again, you can't tell us the difference between an average and a percent.
No, I'm not a data analyst.
Object to form.
Asked and
I
answered.
think he understood. Well, he answered the question. I have to assume that he understood it if he answered the question. So,
Well, Your Honor, I don't think that's a fair assumption because he may think he knows what he meant, but doesn't, and so he answered a different question. For example, Your Honor,
I don't need a speech. Hold on.
an average could be a percentage, or
But now he's
Wait,
telling Your Honor the
Mr. Liddy.
witness.
Mr. Liddy, I think I have every confidence that Mr. Valenzuela can answer, I don't understand, or I need it clarified.
Okay.
He answered the question.
I withdraw the objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right. And so you don't understand the difference between a percentage and an average, yet you expect this court to believe your testimony about you extracting this and analyzing the data on your own.
Object as to form.
Overruled.
As indicated, I didn't look to create averages.
Yes or no?
Oh, I thought you were asking me to clarify, so that.
Yes or no question.
Then-
Your Honor, I think you should let the witness finish answering the question.
Hold on a second. On cross-examination, he gets to ask you questions. If it's capable of being answered yes or no, you can answer yes or no. If you're not capable of answering it yes or no as he's requesting, you can say that. Your attorneys will have the opportunity to ask you additional questions on redirect. Again, I don't want you to guess or speculate as to what you think is being said. If you do not understand what's being asked of you, yes, to either have it rephrased or tell me that you cannot answer the question as it's phrased. Fair enough, Mr. Valenzuela?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well.
Your Honor, I ask that counsel not interrupt the witness while the witness is in the middle of an answer.
I understand the exchanges are very fast. So all I ask is that everybody give the same courtesy to each other of not talking over each other. I'll just leave it as far as the witness will wait for the question to be fully asked before giving an answer, even if you think you know where it's going, and counsel will not object until the question's fully asked. And then if there's an answer to the question, you can let the witness answer, and then you can point out if it's capable of yes or no, then you have to answer yes or no. Fair enough, everyone? Well, it's not open for debate. That's the way I want to run it. So, next question.
Oh, did he answer that one? I didn't hear it.
Why don't do you want it read back or do you want to ask it again?
Can we read it back?
Go ahead, Luz. I
I
think
may ask then if you could
Why don't
repeat.
go back before that.
Yeah, that's
the
the last
actual
question.
Now we're talking over each other.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Back, I'm asking that the court reporter read back the question that was initially asked before the exchange about how the answer would be given.
Question already is, you don't understand the difference between percentages. Average.
So could you rephrase the question just for my clarity?
All right. For your clarity, Ray, you do not know the difference between a percentage and an average, yet you expect this court to believe that you extracted and analyzed this data on your own.
Objection as to form.
Because it's multifaceted, I take it. But there's a predicate question that came before, so I'll allow the form of the question as he's phrased it, and I've explained to the witness.
Your Honor, my objection of form is not based on the multifaceted, although that would be a valid objection. It's based on the predicate that it's either an average or a percentage. Where in the world of mathematics, a
Wait.
percentage can be expressed
Wait,
Your Honor.
Mr. Liddy?
as
Mr.
an
Liddy,
average.
what you're doing is a speaking objection, and I've given that liberal sway in this case up to now. But I have to draw the line is you can't educate the witness by your objection as to how you
Understand,
should
Your Honor.
answer the question.
Objection as to form.
So I think, Mr. Valenzuela, I can have it read back another time if you'd like to, sir, just to be sure. It's up to you whether you can answer or you want it read back.
I believe I can answer is no.
You don't expect the court to believe you.
No, then the answer is yes. So it was the way the question was asked, then the answer is yes.
All right. Would it surprise you to learn that there are no averages in that data that our expert testified to yesterday?
Would not.
Okay. And so all the talk and your testimony yesterday about averages is irrelevant, isn't it?
I don't know how that correlates
Okay.
personally.
Calls for a legal conclusion, Your Honor.
I think he's already answered the question by doesn't know how it correlates.
I was not able to hear the answer. I apologize, Your Honor.
Yeah, Your Honor, I mean, if people could speak into the mic, that would be very helpful.
Ray, could you move the mic closer?
It is tough to hear back here.
For me.
All of you.
Okay,
It's a valid point.
understood, Your Honor.
Mr. Blem doesn't have that problem. I have usually been accused of being soft-spoken. I haven't heard anybody accuse Mr. Blem of that. That wasn't meant as an affront. That was,
You recall your testimony, Ray, when you were on direct examination? I specifically asked you if you received lists or you batch process. You recall that?
I recall.
You recall you saying no?
That's correct.
And today your testimony was quite different, wasn't it?
I don't know how so.
Okay, because you testified today that you do batch process based on list. That you batch
Objection as to form. No, there's no prior testimony of him doing batch lists.
okay. Again, one question at a time. There was prior discussion this morning about batch. I can read back my notes, but specifically, the word batches was used in describing certain categories. So again,
Not batch lists.
Mr. Blem, ask your question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Where did you get the information, Ray, that you actually do batch process data or ballot affidavit envelope approvals?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
So yesterday when you asked me about batch lists, you said we use lists. We do not use lists. We use a system by which we process and load a batch of affidavits, as an example, and those are processed through. It's not a physical list or a list at all that we are referencing for processing.
So my reference to a batch then just required a no answer, that you do not batch process things.
We indeed do batch process.
Well, I know that, Ray. And you know how I know that? Can you look at user number 29 on that sheet?
Exhibit what?
Exhibit 47.
Thank you. You may.
I just want, you've got the sheet, I want to confirm I got the right email. I'm sorry, Your Honor, user 26.
Oops.
All right, Mr. Valenzuela, if your testimony today was correct, the number of people who voted and showed an ID that you testified to should match the number of approvals by user 26. Is that correct?
For the most part, it should, yes.
What do you mean for the most part? Does it or not, Ray?
It does not, if you understand the process that you could be a provisional voter, then you would not have gone through this check-in. You would have gone down the provisional path that then was accepted as a yes. So these are not exact. These are those that would have been good sig, unencumbered, in-person voter.
You testified to 44,799 of those ballots that were not signature verified, correct?
There were proof of ID was shown in our in-person voters.
And then you batch uploaded them, correct?
Yes, if you're going to use that term, I'm thinking of subgroup of 250 when I use the term batch.
Okay.
But those are not batch upload. Those are uploaded and imported into the signature verification status of good sig.
Okay. And you testified that those ballots do not go to signature verification because they've been done. Is that correct?
They don't go through the level 1 signature review process. They go through the process of being archived, captured, for prosperity and as the ledger of those individuals, but they do not get level 1 review.
All right. And so, did you hear Mr. Spicking's testimony yesterday that he did not include user 26 in his analysis?
I did hear that.
Okay. Would you agree with that?
That he did that, he would speak to that, and I did agree that he said that.
Yeah. You agree, would you not, that it would be proper to remove those if looking at overall percentages approved?
Absolutely.
That would be kind of unfair, wouldn't it?
It should not be included when establishing.
Yeah. If they were used and you were trying to look at total percentages approved and the rate at which they were approved, that would skew things, wouldn't it? It would make users appear to approve faster.
Correct.
And so if that data wasn't used, those ballots could not have skewed the data. Is that correct?
If those ballots were not used, hypothetically correct.
And you heard Mr. Spicking's testimony that he did not use them in his analysis.
In this creation of this signature verification, yes, my understanding.
All right. Can you go to user number 6? And I'm not sure on this chart, we actually show user number 6. But you have more than one account that you use to batch process data. Is that correct?
Objections to form?
Okay. Okay, for this one, I do need you to explain the form because I think it looks straightforward to me. If I'm missing something without explaining.
In the formulation of the question, counsel used the phrase that you use batch process data. And the witness has already testified that they do not use batch use process data.
All right. With that, I'll overrule it. He can answer.
Really quickly, Your Honor, if I may. Did I say 6 or 9?
You said 6.
Just one's upside down of the other. I meant 9, I apologize. And so is user 9 another one of your administrative accounts?
I don't have the information to know what
You don't have
that user 9 is at this moment, who that or what that's assigned to.
So you just don't have any personal knowledge whatsoever. It's the manager of the elections department and somebody who analyzed this data set.
As for each one of these users, I do not know, other than even the one that is indicated, the 44799 user 26, you indicated I do not know that was our Converse. I just have the numbers known to which were, how many counter voters were processed as good sig.
All right. You recall Mr. Specking's testimony yesterday that says he did not include user number 9. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
And you recall it was because they appeared to be processed by a machine.
Because they have 0 seconds of review.
Right.
So, and I concur that that would be indicative of that.
Okay. So if they weren't included, they don't matter. Is that correct?
They're showing on the chart and the percentages are showing.
Right. That was the only chart I had. So I just wanted to see you.
But it's cumulative at the column at the end. It actually, the end result, if you're looking at the chart, looks to include them because it doesn't show minus.
Oh, sorry. With respect.
I'd ask that he not interrupt the witness while he's pleading his answer.
Sorry, Your Honor. I apologize that I caught it, and I will try not to let it happen again, Your Honor.
Did the court reporter catch the end of the answer? No? Yes. Very well then. Thank you.
I mean, it's like the dashes.
Dash is not the answer. So, Mr. Valenzuela, could you repeat your answer if you're able to? If you're not able to, I'll have the question re-asked.
As it relates to this chart, you are inquiring if those were not included, and I'm indicating that in review of it, there is a cumulative total verifications at the end that would infer that that full column was subtotaled, and so that's where I was inferring that they are included in this particular exhibit.
All right, user number 9. Okay, you analyzed the data, beginning of trial. Do you know if user 9 is an administrative count for rejecting signatures?
Objection as to form. This witness testified that he did not analyze it, not that he did analyze it.
Again, it's cross-examination. I understand the need to be very certain of terms, and the witness has to be careful of that. That's why I think I've admonished repeatedly to be very careful about what you answer, not assume you understand what you believe to be asked to be the case unless you clearly understand the words that are used. So I can't make it any clearer than that. So
Thank you, Your Honor.
To answer your question, I will re-emphasize I did not analyze any of the data. I actually filtered to the specific user that I knew identified as our counter voters. So when you ask about user 9, I do not know what user 9, who user 9 is. So I don't know, I can't speak with certainty what those are reflective of.
All right. Would it surprise you to learn that user number 9 was an administrative account used to process as a batch rejections?
It wouldn't surprise me that we have that log because we do have to convert at the end of cure question signatures to bad signatures as a final status. And that would be recorded as such as an entry to that disposition.
Maricopa County has a contract with Runbeck to analyze ballot affidavit envelopes for the presence or absence of a signature. Is that correct?
Correct. There is a process by which we are looking at pixels to see if there is or is not.
Okay. And is it not true that the result of that search by Runbeck is sent to you so that you automatically know which ballots need to be processed at a level other than level 1?
That is correct. It is used to pocket those particular packets that have no signature so that a human level 2 reviewer can review them for authenticity to validate that there is no signature, there is no pixels in that case.
Okay. So is it fair to say, Ray, that user number 9, I'm not sure why I keep confusing 9 and 6, but users number 9 and 26 would all have zeros in terms of upload time?
I can concur that the user 26, 44,799 would match up to being the in-person. The other, I can't confirm that those are for rejects, but even if they were, they're done at the level 2 review, not through any third party as you're inferring. It is all done at level 2 human being review that would concur that is no signature or identify no signature and set that disposition.
Based on your analysis of the data, how many ballot affidavit envelopes were reported to you by Runbeck to not contain a valid signature within the signature box?
I don't have that data. That's not part of what I would presumed would be under review, so I don't have that.
Regardless, the 44,000 plus processed by user 26 and whatever amount user 9 processed would never have gone to level 1 review, correct?
A record that has been proven identity would not undergo the scrutiny of level one to say, we need to prove their identity. So you're correct that 44,799 already had been validated and would not go through that level one review.
Okay. Now, the ones that were rejected for absence of presence of signature would be sent to curing, is that correct?
No, it would go to, well, if you're talking about still the signature verification process, it would go to level two,
Okay.
which would be 100% reviewed. And then they would be just as if they were set through an exception, would be then identified as a preliminary question or a question signature. That would then absolutely go through curing. We require that they go through curing.
So if none of that data that we just talked about with respect to users user 26 and 9 was sent to level one review, and Mr. Specken did not analyze those in his review that is before you as exhibits 47, those have no way to skew the percentages contained in exhibit 47. Is that correct?
I could not concur. I don't know the data enough to how Mr. Specken calculated, so I wouldn't guess.
Well, then I'll ask you to assume. If you assume Mr. Specken, as he testified, did not include those numbers in his analysis, they cannot impact the percentages, can they?
If he did not include them, then correct, they would not impact the percentage.
Okay. You have another 3,800 approximately that were sent via UACAVA, correct?
That's how many total that were returned to us.
Okay. And those do not go for level one review, is that correct?
They cannot.
Okay.
Because they are not in an envelope, as
Okay.
I already indicated.
Understood. I just want to make sure that the record is clear with respect to numbers, because there was a lot of talk yesterday about baseball and averages. And so if these never went to level one, and Mr. Specken never included them in his analysis, they would not impact the percentages contained in Exhibit 47. Is that correct?
That's incorrect.
It's incorrect.
Yes, because they don't go through level one as what you're inferring, but they do get a disposition of good sig. So when that user logs in to scan in that piece ID, that is attributed to that user as having scanned in, and could be a 0 second for that user that scanned that in on one of these lines, because you can't just scan. It must be under a user name.
Okay. Are these done under the user account number 26?
No, these are done under staff usernames that are assigned that day to review that signature, make that good, and then go into that special handling system that will say, we are identifying these as good sig under, as an example, Valenzuela R, I scanned 3 in, then there would be potentially under Valenzuela R, those scans, it could be 0 second.
Okay, and they would show as a level one acceptance?
No, they would just, because there is not an exception. Level one is specifically driven towards exception. It would show as a good signature.
Right. And so it says either, and I apologize, but I'm sure you'll understand my terminology. If I don't use your specific terminology, please refresh my recollection. But level one reviewers can either accept or exception.
You can do exception or good.
Okay. So now is what you're testifying to right now that a level one reviewer might get one of these 3,800 UACAVAs, see that it's approved, and hit accept?
No, they would not.
They would not get it.
Not a level one reviewer, no.
All right. So if my question to you is this, if Mr. Specken filtered out for only those level one reviews, would you strike that? Let me rephrase the question. If Mr. Specken testified or filtered out those ballots and anything that was not done by user level one, they would not impact his analysis as contained in Exhibit 47. Is that correct?
That is incorrect.
Why is that incorrect? If Exhibit 47, Ray, is based on user level 1 inputs, and they only have one of 2 inputs, how would their inputs be impacted by this URCAVA data?
Because there is no level 1 identifier in the raw data. I am absolutely certain of that. So a user could have set a good SIG at level 1, is correct, but can also be set at level 2. So to indicate that we extrapolated the level 1 good SIGs or only focus on that, it's impossible. This would be inclusive of all good SIGs because there is no level identifier. I can also set a good SIG at level 3 in the audit review. So again,
Who told you, Ray, there's no level 1 identifier?
I know that because I'm part of that public records request. And then we know our system, there is dispositions that can be captured, but it is not tracked by the level.
Okay. So you testified yesterday, I think it was yesterday, that you had never used this data before, never seen it before. That Maricopa County Elections Department does not review employees based on this data, and you've never used it. And I think that's pretty clear from the PRR 1482, correct?
Objection to form clarification, what data he's referring to?
The data that is contained within Exhibit 20 that you testified you analyzed before you came here today.
Objection.
Sorry, at the beginning of trial.
Again, he
I don't want to
testified he
misstate your
did not analyze it.
Hold on. Do you understand the question?
I believe so.
And you can answer it.
So I testified that I did not see the raw data that is used to create this, but I am very familiar with the raw data that was provided for the We the People PRR 1482.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
And here's what I would like. Hold on, strike that. I'm going to ask that question in a few minutes. Okay, if we go back to the 70,000 number, we'll just make this easy. Let's go back to the 70,000 number, right? There are 3,800 URCAVA ballots that you say would be included in that. Is that could be included in that because of the rate at which they were approved?
That could be included, correct.
And you can do simple math?
I believe so.
So if you and I just had a gentleman agreement whereby we would simply remove the 3,800 from that data, what would the number be?
The 70,000, and it'd be 66,000 if we round up to 4,000.
Okay. It's a fairly substantial number, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
That you're identifying as being 0 second?
No, what does the chart say? Table.
It says 0 seconds, 44,799. And then for the.
No. If we extract the 3,800 URCAVA ballots, because we had already agreed that users number 26 and 9 were not included in Mr. Specking's analysis. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
The top users or the top people who approved the most?
Okay.
If they're not included in there, and your testimony is that the 3,800 is included in there, then that's all we need to remove, correct?
Objection, form and foundation.
I suppose.
If you understood the question and you can answer it, you can do so.
The first point is that I don't see the 70,000 number noted on this chart at all. So when you keep referring to, could that not be? There is no 70,000. It was only brought up by Mr. Olson and also within the court. So I'm using that just as much as you are, saying 70,000 is what you determined to be 2 seconds to 0 seconds. And I don't see the 70,000 here at all. So I wouldn't remove 3,800 from 70,000 that's not reflective on this chart.
Okay. All right. And we'll come back to that. And,
We will?
well, I got another
How
question.
many times?
Well, no, Your Honor, we're going to do more math.
I don't mind more math, but I do mind going over the same problems or the same questions again and again and again. So
Understood, Your Honor.
you get the answer, you move on. So do you have another question? I'm trying to be patient and I'm giving you all the leeway I can. But let's be succinct, to the point, and then move on. I assume that much of this is for foundation for another witness I'll be seeing later today. Am I right?
Excuse me, Your Honor?
I'm assuming much of this is for another witness I'll be seeing later today?
Well, that depends, Your Honor.
Okay, then that's fine. I'm not going to inhibit your case.
Right.
I'm just saying, for expeditious use of time, it seems to me,
All right.
as the trier of fact, that I've heard the same line of questioning at least 4 times this morning.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. You testified about the video of whom I've been referring to as a specific user. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
And you testified that, you couldn't be clear, but you believe he might have been going backwards. Did I get that right?
Doing a second review, however, that normally would infer going backwards from your almost done batch.
And so you've had a chance to look at your own data now, right? Does going back through and looking add any keystrokes?
It does not, unless you change something. You have the option to say, oh, that should have been a reject or exception or a good sig, whatever it may be.
So if someone took 250 seconds to review 250 signatures, and this is a hypothetical, right? And then they went back and scrolled back through them all just to clarify, it wouldn't suddenly become in the data a 250 in 500 seconds, correct?
Correct. It would not be part of the data because you're not setting a disposition.
Okay. So the only data then, just to be clear, that is contained within Exhibit 20, the data set, in terms of ballot, affidavit, envelope, acceptance, or exceptioned. Those 2 pieces, correct? And user number, but for data keystrokes, it would be accepted and exceptioned?
For level 1, it would be exception or good.
Okay, good. Good's better than saying accepted and accepted. So. And can we bring up October 17th? I want to talk to you a little bit about who I refer to as user number 134. And you've had some time now, apparently, to look into this user, to learn more about him, correct?
To inquire about.
Objection, foundation. We have no idea who 134 is, Your Honor. What he's referring to.
Okay. I'm going to overrule. If a question's asked about 134, Mr. Valenzuela can determine whether he can answer the question or not.
And the witness answered, Your Honor.
And if I may, for clarification, I don't know that that's 134, but I do know who this individual is as far as.
Okay, that's clarified it. You weren't paying attention because you're talking back there, but he just answered the question that you objected to.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be critical by saying that. He clarified, he just stated on the record, I don't know who 134 is, but I know who the person in the video is.
I understand that, Your Honor, but
Yes.
I'm rising for a different reason.
I apologize then. Go ahead, Mr. Letty.
I don't know, Your Honor, what is up on the screen. Is that Exhibit 19 or is that a new video?
Oh, that is not an exhibit, and I apologize.
Yeah, thank you. Joining as well, I would ask the court to please have Ms. Lake's counsel tell us what we're looking at before they start asking questions so we can follow along and do our jobs.
So it's foundation, Your Honor.
And so what I'm going to show, Your Honor, I will ask the witness if he can tell if it's the same individual or not. But what I'm going to show, Your Honor, are still images of the individual I'm referring to as Exhibit 134, as user number 134. Now, I know there's no agreement or stipulation as to that, but I'm referring to him that as I don't have any other better name to use. But I'm going to show still images of him sitting at the same desk on October 17th, on November 10th, 11th, and then one of him in his new role that is actually handling ballot affidavit envelopes. Because this trial started, Your Honor.
Well, first of all, you've already told me. You don't have to tell me why, the because, and make the argument. You've told me what you're intending to show by using this video. You want to use videos that are not marked for identification?
Correct, Your Honor, and stills, and I'm not going to move them into evidence. I'm not going to try to move them into evidence.
Okay.
Record, Judge, just so I can do what you need to do.
Morgan, go ahead.
Objection, Judge. He agreed to disclose exhibits. We disclosed exhibits. I'll remind the court, I disclosed my impeachment exhibits even. This is late disclosure. I'll remind the court, I think this is the second or third time. This is inappropriate. I think the court agrees. I think the court expressed that agreement.
Your Honor, I would add that this is prejudicial to our clients as well. We have no way of understanding what's happening right now and how to.
And Your Honor, I would add that I understand why the court has been lenient, certainly in the case in chief. They've rested their case. I think it's wholly inappropriate and prejudicial to have new exhibits entered while he's cross-examining a witness at this late hour, a material that has not been disclosed to this party. Thank you, Your Honor.
Right. Been trying to stretch. Yeah, it's been pointed out to me that we're over time for the court reporter. It had been my apparently false hope that we might have been finished with one portion of direct or recross in a relatively short period of time.
If it pleases the court, Your Honor, we can take a break and I'll move on.
You don't want to use the evidence, or you're not going to ask that line of questioning?
Well, Your Honor, I would love to, because he's given completely different versions.
If you're not going to ask the questions related to showing the video, then just tell me that. You don't have to tell me why or why not. But that will alleviate the objections and the ruling on the objections, but it's up to you.
I will withdraw the question, Your Honor.
Okay, so you're not going to use the video clips?
They're still images, but no, Your Honor.
Images, I'm sorry, I misspoke. All right, so you're not, so the objections are all withdrawn.
Objection withdrawn, Your Honor.
Withdrawn, Your Honor.
Thank you. For the sake of my court reporter, we're going to take a 15-minute recess. And we'll be back at quarter after the hour.
Thank you, Your Honor.